Hi guys, this is our latest video where we tackle the challenging topic of what we wish white families knew about raising black children. This video is a little longer than I had hoped it would end up, but while I was editing, there's just too much valuable content that I just couldn't bring myself to cut out. So it ended up being a little more than an hour long, but it's worth it. Especially watch it start to finish, because it gets better as it goes for sure. It starts out, we're talking about some difficult topics like race and racism in generalities, and then we get more specific as the video goes on to how it applies to adoptive families, especially white families raising black children. So the subject matter is something that Kate and I are very passionate about. It's important to our family because we are a white family that's raising a black child. But even if we weren't, it should still be important from the standpoint of acquiring firsthand knowledge of what it's like to raise black children in the United States and understanding how it's different, what the unique challenges are, and learn it from people that live it and walk it every day, you know, firsthand knowledge, not something from government or from political parties or even from other people's wayward opinions. So today we're going to be talking to our friends Reggie and Kenlana Ferguson, and every time Kate and I have difficult conversations with them, we come out enlightened and better equipped as parents, not just for our black daughter, but also for our white sons, who are going to be raised with a better awareness of some of these difficult issues and to make them better anti-racist for their generation going along. So I hope you enjoy the video. Check it out. So first, let me say thank you guys for doing this. As you know, we're doing this adoption series. The series is called What I Wish You Knew, and this particular episode is going to focus on what I wish white adoptive families knew about raising black children. It doesn't come with any textbooks. They don't teach us this in school, and we don't have the cultural background to facilitate that for families that adopt or foster children of color. So we're hoping to get your perspective. So you are Reggie and Kenlana Ferguson, and why don't you give us a little bit of background about what you guys do?
Well, for hello everyone to start. For me, I grew up in the Kalamazoo, Battle Creek area. I went to public schools, and I grew up mainly in what is referred to as the inner city. So I didn't grow up in the suburban neighborhoods. I grew up mainly in the inner cities of Kalamazoo and Battle Creek. Went to both public schools. I graduated from Kalamazoo Central High School, and then I went to Western Michigan University. I've been working in the criminal justice system for about the past 18 years now. I met my wife, about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, and her and I got married. We've been married now for, probably about 11 years, close to 11 years.
Make sure to get that one right, Reggie.
And we have one beautiful son. He's 11 years old now, and my wife and I have had the pleasure of working. Her and I, she'll tell you a lot. She'll elaborate more on her experiences working, but we both had the pleasure of working with students and children and populations of color, underprivileged, and in her case, privileged a lot of times. So we like to give back as much as possible, and we do that. She does that a lot more than I do outside of work. I do it a lot more during my job. So I think that's pretty much about it. I know I'm missing a bunch of things, but feel free to elaborate on anything else after that.
So I wasn't born and raised in Kalamazoo. I'm from a town called Muskegon, about an hour and 15 minutes away from here. I came to Kalamazoo for college. So I am a three-time Bronco. I got my bachelor's, master's, and PhD from Western Michigan University. I'm a psychologist by training. I have a background in the criminal justice system. That's my bachelor's degree. And then both my master's and PhD are in psychology. And I am a licensed psychologist. I work as the director of the counseling center at Kalamazoo College. I'm also a part-time professor at Western Michigan University. I also am right now the interim director of our Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership at Kalamazoo College. And I also have a consulting business, and I do diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And I'm on a million boards, and I do a lot of other volunteer work, and I'm in a sorority, and we do, our mission is to be of service to all mankind. So that's a lot of the service work that I do here in Kalamazoo.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you guys today specifically is because I know your history, I know how much you guys have done, and I know how passionate you are about some of these issues. But an issue that is presenting itself in the adoptive foster community is when white families adopt black children. And then the black children are growing up in a white world and carrying with them all of the same, I want to say, naiveness that I think a lot of white people have about the situation of race in this country, the history of race in this country, and it becomes a problem for them as they grow. So we're hoping to just shed a little bit of light on that. So one of the things that is a point of contention when it comes to race issues is the definition of racism from the white community is not the same as the definition from the black community. But it seems that the white community interprets racism that there has to be an inherent intention of hate included with that, and the black community seems to prescribe to the idea that it doesn't have to necessarily be hate related. What would you say about the difference in definition between the white community and the black community about what the term racism is?
So you put any identity before an ism, it's about oppression. And so racism is really race-based oppression. And what we know about oppression in our society in the United States is when it comes to race, the dominant culture, which is the white culture, has historically dominated every other race. And it's intentional. And I use that word deliberately. It's intentional. And one of the things that I think people struggle with is thinking about when you use the word hate and this intentionality in it. The intentionality of it is historical. And historical in the sense that race in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with race. It's a categorization of people based upon skin color. And people ascribe different meanings to that. But in this country, the meaning that they have given to that is lesser. So there is race in this country is really anytime we bring up race, people think racism, right? And we can't separate what we talk about from the history of racism, and that's been based on categorizations of people so that there are those who are advantaged and that there are those who are oppressed. Historically, that's been an intentional thing so that the dominant culture benefits and have privileges, and then those who do not look like them, sound like them, act like them, as defined by them, then are considered lesser beings. And that's our history. So I think white folks today want to separate that history from what's happening in the now. So we have a lot of people who will say, and they're well-intentioned, good white folks who will say, I don't hate anyone. I think that's probably true, but you can't separate what the historical really context from what's happening today. So you're a good, well-intentioned white person and you say, I'm not racist. What Black folks hear is, oh, okay, you're trying to defend yourself or you're trying to exclude yourself from some of the stuff that we're experiencing today. And so whenever that's kind of like, for Black folks, that perks up our ears to indicate that, yeah, you probably are. You're just trying to defend yourself. But we understand that racism is part of the very fabric of our country. So even folks who don't feel or don't hate people or harm people, we do know that every institution in our country is the fabric is woven into it. And so I think sometimes Black folks, we're thinking about the institution of racism and a little bit less about the interpersonal parts, and we're responding to everything being racist in our country. And that does manifest in our interpersonal relationships because white folks can operate in the world without seeing the racism and feeling the racism, but Black folks see it and feel it all the time. And so I think white people don't necessarily understand how we see racism all the time everywhere, and we're experiencing it all the time everywhere. And hate has a lot to do with racism, but I think more so now it's about those subtle ways in which privilege is used in our society, and it benefits white people and it oppresses Black people. And we are able to identify that very quickly. We're really alert to it in all contexts. And so I think white people think I'm not hanging you up by a noose anymore, or we're not wearing, KKK cloths, or we're not harming you in any kind of way. We're not excluding you in any kind of way. And those overt forms of racism are what white people think is racism, but we know the subtleties of going into a restaurant and not being seated, and it's our turn to be seated, and instead a white couple is seated. So it's really, I think, it's two different worlds. It's like what we see is very different. We are able to pick it out for our safety. We have to be able to assess that, understand, know that, and know how to operate in it. And then white people tend to have blinders.
Reggie, do you got anything to weigh in on that?
No, actually, that pretty much
covered it.
All.
Well, you mentioned the word privilege, and again, I want to reiterate, the reason why I'm bringing some of this stuff up is because when Kate and I adopted Paisley, we just went on this journey of what are we missing? We don't know what we don't know. Let's go find out. And you don't realize until you're parenting a child and you become their armor and have to do everything for them and got to protect them from everything, that you start exploring some of this, and it's just a light bulb goes off. And privilege is another word. It's where the white definition, or the common, I don't want to say the white definition, the common definition of privilege is oftentimes offensive to white people. Now, I pride myself on, I think I've always had a decent understanding of what white privilege is, so I'm not offended by it. But there are a lot of people that the first thing they go to is they say, well, I grew up poor and I had to work for everything. There's no privilege. And it's like, no, you're missing the point. So I was wondering if you got anything to say on the actual definition of white privilege. Do you want to elaborate on that, or do you want me to keep rambling?
Oh, sure, I will. So privilege is basically, if we're talking about white privilege specifically, it's unearned advantages given to people based upon the color of their skin. In our country, it's based upon whiteness. So even poor white people have advantages that are given to them because of nothing other than the color of their skin. We could talk about the intersection of poverty and race. I mean, that is a huge thing. But I hear that argument a lot, especially when I'm teaching, is that like poor people feel closely aligned to the struggle of people of color because of class and SES, because of that experience, but that's not all. There's research that kind of shows that, like, one of the, and I can't think of the name of the research article. I wouldn't, I usually wouldn't do this, but I'm gonna tell you the story. But the findings are that a white person with a criminal background in this study was able to secure a position, and it was a professional position, with a criminal background, and got the job over Black people, Black men in particular in this study, that were well and overqualified for the position. That's a good example of what I'm talking about. So it's not this neutral thing. If I get this, you can have it too. No, if you take this and you get this, then that means I go here. So that's kind of how those advantages work. Privilege kind of sometimes is associated with some earnings. This is not earned in any way, shape, or form. It's just given based upon white skin.
Mm-hmm.
Anything on that, Reggie?
No. Actually, I think she hit it pretty much on the nail on the head on that. Only thing I would like to add is that, especially white people, they have a false, I guess, a false definition on what privilege is. So when they talk about white privilege, they automatically think they'll go to the getting a job over a black person, something that's very overt, and they won't look at the non-overt things. They won't go to the minuscule part of privileges, and that is where a lot, especially of today, in today's standards, that's where a lot of the oppression happens as well. Is in the
Yeah,
minuscule.
because they won't say that what they have is because of the unearned advantages.
Mhm.
The explanation is through, I worked hard for this, or I showed up in this way, or
Mhm.
that explanation of earning, which is not true. So I think that's part of that whole bootstrapping. Well, you can have what I have too if you would just do what I did. But if you really look at it, you were set up to be able to have these advantages through where you went to school, through where you live, who your family is connected to, and even the power in your parents being able to pick up a phone and advocate for you. So there's a lot of little pieces, who your teachers were, who saw you as deserving, because of their own biases. Like we can get down in there, like food. You had food, so you could eat in the morning, and your mind could be ready to learn, like all kinds of things, where you lived and what you had access to. So we could go on and on about that. But, and I'm not saying that there aren't white people who are aware of this, because I know a lot of people who have done a lot of good work to really truly understand racism and where they fit in and their own biases and stuff, that can really look at these things and understand them. But unless challenged, you don't have to.
So I try to explain to people that the neighborhood that I grew up in, the only difference between me and a friend of mine that was black is that for me to be successful, all I had to do was change my clothes, and it was that simple. So yeah, so that's a tough topic, but I think it's an important topic because I think that culturally, I think we just don't understand because we just haven't had to. Anytime the black community advocates for itself, there's this defensive nature of the white community that just knee-jerk reacts. And I've never understood why that is, but it's definitely apparent. And it's, if somebody says Black Lives Matter, somebody comes out and says all lives matter, and oh my goodness, and everything's political in a debate. But that's the world we live in, and this is what we're raising our kids in, regardless of their color. But we have a responsibility as parents of children of color to raise them according to what society is going to throw at them. And I'm going to tell you guys a story, and I'll probably edit this out too, but one of the things that we see how embedded it is before we had Paisley, we had our two adopted boys who are both white. And when people would meet us and they would learn that our children were adopted, everybody immediately asked about birth mother. Okay, and they make assumptions. And the assumptions about our white children's birth mom was, oh, poor young white girl was just trying to go to college, made a mistake. Good for you guys for taking this. Then when they see Paisley, the questions about the birth mother are completely different. The questions about the birth mother are,
Be a drug addict.
exactly, was she on drugs? Was there neglect? This poor child, you rescued her. And that's offensive to most adoptive families. We get really offended when people say we rescued our kids. It's not true. It's just completely based on skin color that those assumptions are there. And that's the only story that the best story that I have to illustrate to my white friends about how this is so embedded in our culture that we don't even realize it.
Well, and you have to think about the history of the white savior also, because that is so this is not about, this is about that whole, how that's been created and how that works, even with like social service organizations or people, the do-gooder white people in the world. It's, we are here to save you. We don't need saving. We need y'all to get out of our way. and let us and stop putting your foot on our neck. There's nothing about us that is inadequate as a people. Like, we are powerful, we are strong, we are some of the smartest, brightest, most, like, we've done amazing things in the world. The things that we've not been able to do is not because we lacked, it's because of systems that have oppressed us. And so the white savior, oftentimes, for example, they come in, they swoop in, and I found this little Black kid, or I found, and look how amazing I made them. It's this ownership of bringing them into a place where they could thrive or where they could be. And that is not the issue. So if we were not oppressed, we could be. If there was, if everything was equitable, then we would have. And so opportunities don't need to be given to us. The barriers need to be taken away in order for us to do what we do and to be who we are. And so that white savior thing is just historical, and it's always been self-serving, I think, for a lot of white people to feel like they've taken the Black community or Black people and made something and created something. And that has never solved a problem related to racism in our country.
The common, I guess it's the common, I don't want to say common, in my circles, the common thought process is racism, race shouldn't be an issue still today because the Civil War solved it, end of story. And they draw a delineating line in the sand and they say, okay, yeah, there was some problems in the 60s. But that's really where most circles draw that line, and they don't see, when you say systemic racism and how it is embedded into the entire system of government, like and you try to explain the practice of redlining or something, it doesn't make any sense to them. They almost think it's made up. What do you say about describing the existence of systemic racism, in that even though things are clearly better than they were 170 years ago, they're still not there, and there's still work that has to be done, whereas most people are like, geez, it's over, done, let's stop pounding this, we're kicking a dead horse.
Sorry.
So what do you say about the existence of systemic racism? Can you describe that a little bit?
Want to take a stab?
Go right ahead, I'll jump in.
So racism it's still very alive, it's very real, it's very present, it's more subtle now. That's the only thing that's changed. And in some ways, the overt forms of racism, we know how to manage better because we see it and we can defend ourselves, we can get out of that situation, we know where it is. But with the way that racism manifests now, your white best friend, in my world, your white best friend could have biases and beliefs, and you could have been friends for 20 years and it would never manifest until their privilege is challenged, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit, for me, it's scarier because we are now able to, for example, I work in mostly predominantly white spaces, and mostly I'm comfortable. But there's another part of this. I also have a PhD, so I have the education that white folks deem as worthy. So I don't claim, I understand why some white folks interact with me the way that they do versus how they would interact with some of my family members without that same education. So I get a check mark because of that. It's silly and it's real. So when it comes to that, the systemic racism and that being over, people just don't fully understand how insidious and how it's woven into everything that is functioning in our country. So sometimes you have to take them to this very scary place, which is an example I always use. We know that through research, the ways that Black babies are treated in a nursery at the hospital is very different than the way white babies are treated in the nursery in the hospital. So I always take it there because these babies have not even really been in the world yet, right? And there is treatment and care of them that is being differentiated based upon the color of their skin. That's about a system. That's not necessarily about a nurse. That's about a nurse whose systems allow for that. So you can be a person who has hatred, and whether it's subtle or overt, and you work in this system, and this is probably a little too much for this example. You work in this system. So say you're a racist nurse and you're given a Black baby to care for, and that baby died of SIDS. Oh, that baby died of SIDS, and that's it. That's it. Did this baby die of SIDS though? Is anybody going to research that? Is anybody going to look further into that? Now, we know that the infant mortality rate of Black and brown babies is higher. And we know that even with things like SIDS, why are Black and brown babies dying of SIDS more than white babies? Right? Nobody's going to look into how hatred, racism, bias, and that doesn't even have to be, I'm not suggesting that someone killed a baby, but babies can die for lack of or not being attended to, or interventions not being given to, right? And sometimes there's deservingness that's associated with that based upon the color of your skin, right? We know that there are people who have needed CPR that have not gotten it because they were a Black and a white person could administer it and they didn't, because that person was Black and they didn't want to do that with a Black person. You know, so we got things like that that are about a system supporting people's hatred and biases. And there is never any consequences to that. So when it's about systemic racism, yeah, you have people with individual biases, but if there are never any consequences, if there is no accountability, then that individual racism is supported by the system and it continues and it's able to go unchecked in a lot of different ways. And so systemic racism supports individual racism. That's how you have to think about it. And that was a lot, but that's kind of where I go to, because I think sometimes those larger, those more hurtful, those more at the core examples have to be given for people to realize how bad this really is. And so we talk about things even like coronavirus. That's what we're dealing with now. So they'll explain vaccine hesitancy is why Black and brown people are not being vaccinated at the same rate as white people. My sisters work in a community and my sister's a public health nurse, and she got people every day, Black people, calling her, when can I get the vaccine? When can I get it? On a list, just waiting for this vaccine. And they're not being shipped the amount of vaccines to serve this one small Black community. But then you go across maybe 20 miles away and they have a surplus. So the explanation that we sometimes give, and I'm talking about this today because it's just on my mind around like hesitancy or mistrust, right? It implies that the person or the group of people who are being oppressed are in some way responsible for not getting the resources that they need. That's systemic. That's systemic. So we don't give it to you. We don't provide you the resources, and then we blame you for not taking advantage of the resources that we gave you. That is not what's happening. That's what we hear. That's what history has taught us. But who controls history? Who controls the narrative? Who controls media? So it's all these systems that work together. My argument is that it's intentional. And it's intentional historically. It has always meant to work that way so that the history can be woven, the narrative can be woven, and then no one is punished.
All right, so I'm gonna throw something at you, and when I ask the question, please don't think for a minute that I am in the camp that believes this. But there is, even among some Black people, are of the mindset that the Black community has been relegated to second class because they have been fed a victim mentality that they all buy into, and not this systemic racism that exists throughout our entire society. What would you like? I know what I would like to say. What would you guys like to say to that particular mentality?
Well, I think that more Black people today are aware and are open to and have been open to see more systemic racism than especially younger generation of Black people today. They're more aware, they're more vocal, they're more vigilant against systemic racism in particular today than in decades past. Um, I was just recently reading an article, and I'm not going to get too far off our topic here, but I was just recently reading an article, and I was in a conversation with a group of people, and they compared racism today, specifically systemic racism today, to wars in general. And so and I thought it related really well. When our country fought wars in the past, it was Americans against, you know, another country. We had Americans in American uniforms, that country in that uniform, and we know who we were shooting at. That's the enemy.
Mhm.
That was true for racism as well, specifically systemic racism. In the past, 60s, 50s, 40s, 70s, you know, it was white oppression. They held up crosses, burning crosses. They had hoods on. We could see them. Well, as the years and we fought that, as the years progress, the wars progress. So if you look at wars today, it's not, you know, it's not another soldier in another uniform. They blend in with the community.
Domestic.
So, and they're smaller. They're not these huge 100,000 troops against your 100,000 troops. There are a lot smaller wars, and as so, that's how racism and systemic racism is being fought now. It's not marching on. It's not a million people marching against each other with burning crosses and hoods and dogs and water hoses and different things like that. There's a lot more smaller battles, the same battles, if not more, but a lot more smaller battles to be fought in the grand scheme of the war. Does that make sense at all? The youth today, when I say youth, the younger generation, our generation and younger, I think they're more open and their senses are more aware to what's going on around them than it has been in past. So they're going to be more sensitive to things. They're going to be more outspoken to things. And I think that is what is not only what's needed, I think that is what is going to further the progression.
And when it comes to this idea of, so you got young people that are now advocating for themselves, and that's being called complaining. That's not complaining, that's fighting. That's saying I will no longer accept the way that I have been pushed out, pushed back, marginalized, silenced. And then I've also heard things like, well, why are you expecting people to give you something? No, that's not it. It's just saying, get out of my way. The system is a barrier. These systems are barriers. You're holding me down. You got your foot on my neck. That's not the sound of a victim. That's the sound of a person fighting for freedom. And I believe, you know, this idea of victim, you know, you've got this idea of, so I'm gonna go back just a little bit. So I'm gonna put a pin in that because I'm coming back to it. But this, if you take a group of people and for years and decades, you tell them who they are, what they're worth, and you got every system in a country or in an area that's saying the exact same thing, right? This is about learning. This is about what this country said I can do, what these groups of people said I can be, what they kept me out of, which then told me what I should go after and what I couldn't go after, right? And this is all like that box that people have been put in. So then that carries over into the next generation. And the next generation, my mom told me I could not go to a HBCU because I needed to learn how to exist in the world with white people. So if I went to an HBCU that was creating this Black utopia, that wasn't the real world for me. And so I'm at Western, this PWI, because my mom needed to make sure I was equipped to live in the world with white people. So those are the like lessons that she believed were necessary for me to be able to exist and be safe, right? Folks ain't out here trying to necessarily not fight the system. They're trying to be safe. We get killed when we try to fight system. Like that's just real. So it's not about like you're a victim. It's about we know what's actually real. If I enter into this space and I assert my rights, then you're going to feel threatened. And then my life might change because you feel threatened. So it's not about it, this idea of victims. If they wanted more, they could have more. That's that merit-based BS that I think has always been about the blaming the victim. And that's so that white folks don't have to take ownership of what they created so that people could not rise up and thrive and be who they were meant to be. So that's a lame excuse, and that's a failure to take responsibility for the systems that created this marginalization and this oppression. It's not. It's a myth.
Nicer than I would have been.
I did say BS, which I was trying not to say, but that's, sorry. You might have to edit that, but that's
all right. I might have gone full disclosure on that one. So
one of the most dangerous things that racism has done is to strip us from our identity as Black people and to almost brainwash us into thinking that we're a group of people whom we're not. Brought us to this country, defined us. And then, you got generations and generations then who are living out this definition of who we are. And I think that's just the most dangerous thing about racism is when we have the internalization of the messages that have been put out there about who we are, and we take those in as truth. So you will have kids of color with low self-esteem or low regard for their intellect, or they're shy and they won't speak up because the world has said that you don't matter. And to me, that's the most damaging thing. And then in communities, systemic racism has created a lot of what tears down communities of color. If you go back to slavery, there were people who worked in the field and there were people who worked in the house. And that started creating a divide, right? And so the people who worked in the house were valued differently than the people who worked in the field. So even within a group of people who share the same racial and cultural background, it starts to create this divide. Well, this ain't inherent to us as a community. This was created through white supremacy. And so it's really, really dangerous then when we take on that stuff, and we do inherently if it's not challenged. So that's why it's really, really important, I think, even for families who are adopting children to understand that. So these things start to happen and they're really, really subtle, and it starts to teach kids who they are. And if you don't come from a family who tells you otherwise, or a community who tells you otherwise, if you don't get the other history books, then you won't know. And we sometimes grow up in this country as people of color, not truly understanding who we are and how it came to be that the misinformation and we weren't taught our true heritage.
I'm gonna keep you guys all night because you keep putting questions in my head, but I'm gonna try to stay focused. Like, number one, I'm like, okay, so where do we get the right history books, for one? Put a pin in that, because I'm going to want to know the answer to that question, because there are times where Kate and I, we feel helpless with some of these things, because, again, we don't know what we don't know. So these are the questions that we got to rely on other people for. What do we need to be teaching, Paisley? But before we get on to that, I wanted to talk to you guys, because you had mentioned earlier about the subtleties of racism, that they're not blatant, or I'm sorry, Reggie, you were talking about that they're not as blatant as they were before. It wasn't as easy as saying, look, you guys are in the white sheets, we know who you are, we know how to combat that. It's not. And our family has experienced that just by adopting Paisley. But the most people that I would deem racist, they wouldn't believe they're racist even if you told them. They just don't believe it's true. And there's this whole movement, and it's gained a lot of steam the last few years, is this white nationalist ethno-state movement, which is extremely scary for families like mine. But they don't believe that they're racist because again, they don't feel like they have any hatred towards anybody because of the color of their skin, but they still want white people living here and black people living here, and they don't want integrated at all.
And they don't see color.
And they don't see color. Yep, they're colorblind. And you know, and it makes me wonder what do they think of a family like ours? And I know that we have lost friends. Colton, for example, had a great friend whose family will not engage with us simply because they don't want a role model for their kids. And they so, oh, it's nothing personal. Well, it's pretty personal to us. But I mean, this is the belief, the mindset that's out there of this new ethno-state movement, like you were talking about, Reggie, that it's just not as crystal clear as it once was.
No, but my reactions to that are so much stronger. So I'm managing my own responses to that. You go ahead.
Well, I just think that, you know, I think that a lot of people today, that's the default answer that they have is I don't see color. You know, I don't, and that itself, you know, disgusts a lot of black people because, you know, that's a default answer that a lot of white people who try to separate themselves from racism and systematic racism will give. You know, hey, I don't see color. I don't see the difference between you and the next person. And that offends us so much because you should recognize my color. You should recognize the work that I had to put in to get to this position, and you should recognize the sacrifices that I had to make in order to get here. So that I think that default is common now, especially now. I hear it a lot, and certainly Lana hears it a lot. I have heard it a lot, but I think that's a default. That's a safe answer that a lot of people would give.
Well, it's the answer that people use when they're trying to prove that they're good people.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, one of the best parts about who I am is black. There has never been a time in my life that I've wished to be anything other than black in a system that I have been suppressed. And, you know, I'm in education, so we already know. But if you don't see me as black, you erase a big part of who I am. And not the pain of who I am, but the celebratory aspects of who I am. I think black people are the most amazing people in the world. And so for you to erase that part of my identity, I don't need it. You do. You need to erase that I'm black for some reason that helps you be able to accept me. I don't need you to erase that I'm black. Actually, if you see me as black, you will learn me better. You will know me better. You are likely to get closer to me if you honor who I am and my blackness. So it's not for us. When people say I don't see color, the fact that you don't is problematic for me. I don't need you to see color and see racism in the way that you're thinking. Like, I don't need you to pour me with seeing that I'm black. I need you to see my blackness as a heritage, as a culture that is beautiful and that is powerful. And I come from a lineage of strong, powerful black people, and to see that as an asset, not a deficit. So that ain't for me. That's for people who want to claim that they're good white folks and never participated in oppressive systems.
So reeling it back into the adoptive world. So if you adopt from a foreign country, there's all sorts of classes and everything that is like how important it is to teach these children about their country and to keep them connected to their culture and their heritage. We don't have that when you adopt black children. It's surprisingly absent. And so I would ask you.
Surprised by that?
Well, a little bit, but again, I'm kind of naive with some of this stuff. Sometimes I'm surprised at how naive I am. You know, but I guess my question is how important do you think it is for a black child being raised in a white family to be connected back to their black heritage, their culture? How important is that?
Yeah, it is imperative. And so I was being a little facetious when I said, "Are you really surprised?" Because I want people who think about adoption as also thinking about how adoption, racism is in adoption, right? And I don't believe that if adopting kids was accessible to Black people, that we would necessarily have this issue. And Black people want kids. Black people who are infertile, or Black people who want more children in their family, or Black people, for all the reasons that white people want kids, Black people do too. So why aren't they seen as parents or families that are worth or worthy? And I can name a whole list: acceptable, appropriate for, so on and so forth. All of that has to, for me, it has to do with, and not for me, like we know that's true. Like, how many people have been denied adopting children? People of color have been denied. And we can go into LGBTQ families, we can do all of these other things, but the homes of Black people have not, and brown people have not always been seen as a fit. That's what they say. It's not a good fit. Or all the ways that they assess a good home, like those boxes can't be checked. And those boxes can't be checked not necessarily because they aren't good homes, but because of racism and because of bias and because of all of these other things. So I first want to say that I think the adoption system is another system that we have to think about racism being a part of what's happening there. And then when I think about, okay, all children need to be cared for and loved. This is, for me, I don't, like, if you're going to take a baby to care for and love on and give them a safe home and protect them, I don't care what race you are. Like, that's important. Babies are vulnerable in the world. They should be protected. If it's a white family looking to take, I'm not that type that's like, oh, the Black baby needs to go to this home. No, the home that the Black baby goes to needs to have a level of awareness and understanding of the things that the Black baby is going to need to be able to thrive. That's it. Like, I commend families. I'm not that person. So it is imperative, though, much like what I'm saying, from the very early stages of life, to give those messages, to introduce that child to their culture. And Black folks are not a monolith, don't get me wrong. It's not like we're all the same, right? But we do have history, and our history is not just racism. Our history is not just slavery. Our history is not just Jim Crow, because that's the things that we tend to teach young children so that they can protect themselves. But at the same time, children, need to be able to celebrate Black culture. I do programming with kids, and it's about the Black arts movement and the Harlem Renaissance and Black Wall Street and back in Kings and Queens. Like, that's the history that I think needs to accompany all those other messages around safety. Like, when you go out into the world, because you can't neglect that. Like, I can't teach Reggie that he is going to be treated the exact same way as a white boy. I've had talks with him about how to interact with the police. We've had those talks for years. So I get concerned sometimes when people think tell them who they are is tell them how bad they've been treated in America. That's not it. That's not the story. So I think it's imperative for folks who are raising Black children to understand that and not be scared. And it's a lot of stuff to be scared around, especially if that's not the world you live and not the lens you have. And it's not about perfection. It's about finding opportunities to just expose them to those things. I even work with people who are Black, with Black parents who are brought up in white communities and really still struggling with their racial identity and what it means to be Black. It's a very personal, individual thing that we all will have to journey. We have a journey around our own racial identity and what that means for us. It's not an answer. Like, you're not looking for Paisley to come out and say, this is it, right? It's Paisley's journey and meaning making and what that means for Paisley at different points in her life. And she will get to decide that, but you give her the opportunity to take in all the parts and all the pieces. and not deny her exposure. And I'm only talking about Paisley because I'm on here with you, but I think it relates to others, and not deny them the information that they need to form a healthy identity and understanding, a full understanding of who they are. And it's gonna be complex. There's no denying that. You can't just take a child with Black skin into a white family and everything's okay. It's at some point manifests in ways that may be really, really beautiful and ways that may be really, really, really hard. So it just being able to like give and have enough resources to deal with that and to manage that. And I think that's what's important, is this openness and not this like these blinders or this naivete that says that we love you and that's all that matters. We love you, and because we love you, we have to stretch as a family to, I don't know, like y'all, you ask questions, you ask me questions. That's what I'm talking about. And ask questions or be uncomfortable and say, hey, what products do you use for your kids' hair? Or to say, hey, what kind of programs are you putting your kids in? Or what, books are they reading? Or should I take my kid or let my kids stay in this space when these white kids are saying this about Black kids? They don't think of her that way because she's from a white family, but she's taking in, okay, I'm protected in this way, but like my friends are not. And what's the difference? And kids start to make sense of that. My mom and my dad is white, that's why I'm different, right? Until they leave your house. So it's really the complexity of all of that, that I think that willingness to wrestle with the hard stuff. And you didn't cause these issues. Your family did not cause this, but it has to be allowable. It has to be a part of conversations. And increasingly, as they're able to understand and learn, the conversation has to continue. So like, oh, don't worry about it. Reggie has a pattern of losing friends. I'll give you an example. He has a pattern of losing friends. And the way that he's losing friends, I'm paying attention to. He loses friends when he asserts himself. Why? Right. Why? Well, it's because before, we live in a community, there's not a lot of kids, right? And before, there was a power dynamic where the other kids were a little bit older than he was, and then he's growing and he's asserting himself. No, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. Well, go home. Right? Oh, as long as he was inferior, as long as age or whatever, but we are at the point now where it's kind of like, why are all my friends white and why do they all dump me? And I'm like, okay, so we need to really talk about this, because I can't necessarily diagnose something, but we need to consider race in this at this point, because we know that young people start to make categorizations and they start to treat each other differently based upon the messages that they're hearing at school. And they say kids as young as 3 recognize race because of categories, not necessarily they understand the social context. But so we have to have these conversations with Reggie about what it means to be a Black boy in a predominantly white area with all white friends. Reggie has been going to summer camp in the at what's the place? Stone's Church, New Genesis. Since we put him in summer programming, and that's been intentional because he goes to a predominantly white school. He needs to spend the summer with people who look like him. And I asked him the question, what's the difference between your white friends and your Black friends? This was years ago. He said, well, my Black friends dance better. Yeah, they do. Now
that's going to be true forever, by the way.
And I said, yeah, you're right. Rhythm comes from Africa. But now so that was a good start to the conversation. We taught him about slavery. I taught him about slavery using some eggs and then using allowance. If I didn't give you allowance and I made you still do the stuff and I didn't give you allowance and I promise. But now he's learning, he understands more. So the conversations are a little bit more, I think they get deeper. and they're longer. So I guess what I'm saying is that willingness to continue to have those conversations, let those conversations evolve, meet the kids where they are based upon what they understand, and don't give them too much because you don't want to make them afraid. But then also, really, even if they don't see certain things, sometimes we have to point it out to them. Much like I see a pattern of you losing friends, and it's not white girls, it's white boys. So it's really a systemic thing that I have a lens around, and I'm not blaming these individual boys, but I'm understanding like what the system teach white boys about who they are and what they can say and what they can do and how they're able to assert their power in ways that Black boys are not taught how to do that. And so sometimes that sounds like you don't want to do what I want to do, so you need to go home.
Yeah, that's extremely interesting and slightly disturbing, all at the same time. I know Reggie. I think the world of Reggie. He's always been one of my favorite kids because I remember coaching him on that baseball field, and he was the kid. He was the one kid at that young age, including my own kid. He was the kid that you would talk to and explain something to, and he's like, "Yup, I'm listening to what you say, and I'm gonna apply it, and I'm gonna try it, and I'm gonna see how it does." And I mean, he's just such a wonderful child. I can't wait for COVID to be over so we can have him over to play some more. So,
Yeah.
So it bothers me that he's losing friends and in the way that he's losing them.
Just add a quick point to that for some context. So he also has some Black friends, they just don't live in our neighborhood. And one of the things that I was able to use based upon his own life is, okay, so when this friend or this friend, when you get into a fight, what happens? Well, we'll be mad and then we'll make up. Yeah, so as they age, you start to see these patterns that you can use to help them understand some of the systemic stuff, which then teaches them how to like really pay attention to these things throughout their lives.
Yeah, Kate and I we did an adult adoptee seminar that we watched here, I don't know, a couple months ago, and there was an adult adoptee. He was a Black kid that was raised in a white home, and he had a lot of these issues, and he was hitting a lot of red flags for us. And he was, he was making the case that regardless of how anybody views Black culture, that taken as a whole, the Black community is all bound by 400 years of oppression. And you can take people in a Black community and they're not getting along, or they're different economic status or social status, and they are all bound by this one thing, and they can all sit down at the barbecue together. And was pointing out that in his growing up in his white family, that wasn't the case. And that was hard for him. He was mad about it, and he was mad that he wasn't connected to his Black culture growing up because he didn't get to see that incredible piece of his heritage that you don't know if you don't grow up in a Black home. And these are the things that, Kate and I, it keeps us up at night because, again, as much as we want to be Paisley Sherpa through all of life, we are not equipped. And so we have to reach out, and we have to do things like this, and we have to say, okay, these are great topics we're talking about. How do we do it? Where do we go? Where do we get these resources? What can we do? I mean, we often just don't know what to do or where to go.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that is powerful in itself to acknowledge that there are some things that, despite all the love and care and everything, want to protect her, you give your life for her. There are just these things that it's a part of being close to those who exist in, like, there are some things about Black culture that I can't explain to you. There are things that we just know, and ways that we can even look at each other and give meaning to it. There's this intrinsic, intuitive kind of things. I believe in epigenetics and things carrying down through generations through our DNA that we can't fully even explain. And that's not to exclude anybody, but that's real. The familial thing, like, we are not an individualistic culture. We just not. You could do a whole lot and we would never give up on you. We are not canceled. We don't cancel people necessarily. That's not to say that some people don't get canceled in the Black community, because they do. But these are all those things that I was talking about, is like teaching the beautiful things. You're going to have a longing for connection as a Black person that you can't necessarily understand. Right. And if you grow up in a community that don't have that, then you don't know, it could feel like loss. And you're processing, you don't have the information you need to process that loss, but you have this yearning to be connected and close in a way that maybe you're not. Well, a white family can create closeness though, right? So that doesn't feel like pain. So when I hear you say you're not equipped, it's not that like there aren't some things that you can do within a family to help those things feel less painful, but also understanding that there's a piece that a person is gonna want to either continue to weave a story for themselves, but it's all about their own racial identity development. It's not that your family doesn't give them what they need to be whole, healthy human beings, but it's just a piece that helps me really attend to the complexity of who I am as a person. And we all need that. We all need that. And so you just can't provide that by like interacting. It's an intentional thing to go out and get it. So it's a little bit more challenging in that way. And where to get it and how to get it, some of that Paisley will get for herself. Honestly, like I know you two, like you'll give her the world, you'll do whatever you can, and then some of it Paisley will just get for herself.
That about sum it up, Reggie?
Pretty much so.
All right, well, before we close out, I'm going to see, Kate, do you got anything that we're missing?
I just had a point to that talking about that puzzle piece is so true, because as she was saying it's like, yeah, on some level we already realize this with our older two. We're worried, we're always trying to be proactive about that missing part of the puzzle that they don't have, the questions that we don't have the answers to, the identity, the what you grow up and believing who you are and all that. So it's just another, I think, layer to that. And then I just want to tell the funny story, and you can tell her about how Paisley always says, well, your skin's pretty too, Mom.
Yeah. Yeah, she's very patronizing with that. Yeah.
Don't worry, Mom.
Yeah, your hair's pretty too. Yeah. Your skin's pretty too. Yeah.
But at 5, that's what we're talking about when I'm putting lotion on and styling her hair. And I love your curls. And just, owning who she is and loving herself.
We might be overdoing it a little bit with her. We might be turning her into a monster, but.
Well, but no. So if I think about even my interactions with Paisley, so let's just take Paisley as an example. And I know how you all interact with Paisley, and you let Paisley be who she is. Now, let's just imagine a family who wasn't aware that was necessary. There are families who would adopt a Black child and try to train that out of her.
Buzz
and that's exactly the point of why we're doing this.
Buzz their hair because they don't know how to style it.
Yep.
They would treat her like she was a white child. They would try to mold her as if she was a white child, and not recognize her color.
And the beauty in all that sass, like that sass is.
Yeah, we let it fly.
Well in the world, like, yeah, we nurture that, and in a way that is powerful. It's strength, it's strong. You've got a voice and you use it, and you say what is and what's not, right? Because those are all the things that have been taken away from people who look like us historically. So when you got a little one, you're like, yep, let's nurture that and let her be who she is. And that's the danger in having a family who's not aware, because in our country, those things have been, even when you start intersecting gender, no, you can't do that, or be proper, or don't do that, or, sit there and be quiet, or, so all of those pieces I think are important to be aware of. But that's how it is. It's like there are some ways that Black kids show up in the world that are criminalized, problematized, but that's exactly the problem with all of that. that's not it. That's not the meaning of that. That needs to be nurtured. And our communities nurture we nurture things that we identify as strength. We don't want you to be disrespectful, and our voices aren't disrespectful. The world has just heard when we get loud, we're dangerous. And that is not true. When I get loud, I'm just having emotions, just like the white man who flipped over the table. So it really is important that she knows those things, and she does, and then continues to, as she evolves, that the family just evolves with her. And I appreciate when families say, you know what? I don't know. Let's figure it out. Let me Google. Let's start with Google and then go from Google to who do we know? And then who don't, and if it's not about who we know, what can we find out? So just that constant exploration. But the biggest part is acknowledging what you don't know, and don't try to fill in gaps with what you think is going to be what's going to suffice. Go on the journey with her.
So here's the $1 million question that we'll close with. The topic is what we wish you knew about white families raising black children. So I'm going to throw it on you guys. What do you wish white families knew about raising black children?
I wish white families knew the difference. There's going to be a difference in her personality for a black girl or black boy, but we're just talking about her specific. For a black girl versus there's going to be a difference in the personality from having a white daughter. So Lana knows about that difference. I know about that difference from two different perspectives. She knows a lot about it in education. I know a lot about it in juvenile delinquency. But there is a huge difference in the comprehension, and there's a huge difference in the understanding of having black kids versus having white kids. And that's something that that's something that is, I think, is inherent in the culture itself. So I think that I wish white families would invest more time in knowing about the culture of having a black child, invest more time in learning about her culture, and that's going to explain a lot about her personality or his personality when having kids of color, different kids of color.
And I'll piggyback that for my answer. And I wish white families wouldn't feel so intimidated by that there is blackness that is unknown to them. As white people are used to knowing everything. You don't know, and that's okay. And just connect with some black folks and figure it out together, and stop feeling inadequate because of that. I can't tell people how to feel, but it's okay for you not to be the one that knows, and for you to need black people in your life because your child does. And you don't personally, and I pose this too, and every white family with a black child may answer this differently. If it wasn't for your black child, how many black people would be in your life? I'm not asking you to go back and relive, but this could be an opportunity for you also to grow, because you now have a black child in your life, and you got to understand blackness in America. You got to understand the beauty of blackness. You got to understand it very, very differently, and be an advocate for your child, but also learn how not to participate in these systems that can be oppressive. So a family with a black child has an opportunity to be anti-racist. Not just because you adopted a black child, but because walking on that journey with your child can expose you to some things that help you challenge the things that you would not have challenged if you did not have a black child. So I would like a white family to consider going on that journey towards being anti-racist, not just to support that child, but also for your own growth and development. I think that can be really, really, really powerful.
Very well put. So I think that about sums it up, unless you guys have anything else you want to add.
I think we're good.
I yeah, I think I got what I need for the interview. I really appreciate you guys doing this. Every time we have difficult conversations, I always come away refreshed. So I really do appreciate it. I'm going to stop recording.
Hi.
And once I stop recording, then we can just start talking normal.